Welcome one and all, as always, to Football Pass. Lots to discuss, as always, and two excellent talkers to discuss it all with. You'll sense there's a slight Celtic and Rangers vibe with John Barnes and Terry Butcher good enough to join me this morning for a chat about, well, let's start, John, perhaps with what is looking more and more like an ill-fated decision by Celtic, albeit with, it seems, government approval to make this winter trip to Dubai. One positive test as we are talking now. There could, of course, be further complications which may affect the upcoming game and indeed the games to come. Looks like a bad move.
Yeah, of course, with hindsight it is. But first of all, I'd just like to say hello to Terry, because I've seen Terry for 9 years. Obviously, he's been hiding around, and now that it looks as if Rangers are going to win the league, he's now appeared. Terry, where have you been for the last 9 years? I've been trying to get a hold of you. I can't find you. And all of a sudden now here you are. What a surprise.
One thing I would...
But in all seriousness, yes,
obviously
hindsight's a wonderful thing. Go on.
Go on, Terry.
One thing I would say is I've not been, Rangers were plowing the depths during those 9 years, so I'd like to see Celtic do that and come back strong as well. But there we go. Up to you now, John.
No, but as you rightly say, it's obviously with hindsight, it's a ill-fated trip. But more importantly, results in winning football matches mean everything. So had they been flying high, winning all their games, top of the league by 20 points, yes, from a protocol and from a moral point of view, the trip to Dubai would have been questioned. But I'm sure people would have not been making excuses. Now, if you want to talk about it from a footballing perspective, that trip has nothing to do with Celtic's woes on the pitch. The way they're playing, they're losing points. That is obviously a protocol and governmental and moral issue, which obviously doesn't look good. And I'm sure had they had their time again, they would take a different decision and not go to Dubai.
Yeah. Terry, he's right, isn't he, John? Obviously, the benefit of hindsight and the fact that Celtic are having a pretty miserable time of it on the pitch, it all compounds the issue.
Well, I understand that to a certain degree. I just thought that somebody with any common sense at Celtic would have stood back from things and say, well, okay, at the time it was all right to go, but was it really the right time to go? You know, in the situation we're in with this new variant and with cases always rising and deaths rise, etc., etc. I think at the end of the day, well, it may have cost Celtic a bit of money, but it certainly cost them more than just money now. They're getting absolute pelters from everybody, and quite rightly so for going. It's a trip that should never have happened, no matter what the circumstances were, because I think that to do that and show a disregard for people that are sacrificing a lot to stay in and shielding and all this kind of thing as well just sends out the wrong signals. And it's come back to bite them, really, when you think about it, with this new positive COVID test. But I just think from a common sense point of view, it should never have happened in the first place. They should have just cut it and said, right, we were going to go. It was right to go, but from the government point of view and from protocol point of view, but we're not going to do it. We've got more important issues here to try and get back to winning ways.
Yeah,
they've had lots of people.
John?
They've had lots of people testing positive for COVID who haven't been anywhere. Lots of football teams, lots of players who follow protocols and they've been tested. So it's not to say that had they not gone, they definitely would have been tested for COVID. So yes, I understand that it may have been a bad decision, and it is a bad decision because of the way it actually looks. But there's no guarantee that it would have happened, because I'm sure that other clubs who haven't been anywhere have gone, as you've seen in England. How many games have been cancelled when they've been following protocol? So of course, yes, I agree with Terry to a certain extent. But in terms of that being the reason why someone actually got COVID, that can't be proved, but it doesn't look good.
No, yeah, and I take your point, John. I suppose the bottom line is, go on, Terry.
It's not just the fact that this guy, someone's got COVID. I just think it's from an overall picture. From yes, there's lots of COVID cases in football. There's massive COVID cases elsewhere in the population. But it's from a responsibility point of view, you can't embark on trips like this at times like this as well. It's unprecedented. So why go and do something that you always do in normal circumstances when you can't? Well, you shouldn't really do it. From a moral point of view, so many people are dying and getting cases. Why do you then go and away on it's not a holiday, but it is a break into the sun, and it's away from these shores when the government advice is not to travel. If you can, don't travel. Why do you have to travel? Why not stay where other clubs are doing and stay in this country and work things out?
Well, from a moral point,
Yes,
Football
John.
should be cancelled because people who want to do their job aren't able to do their job. So why are footballers being able to do their jobs? So from a moral point of view, we should cancel football if you want to talk about morality. And people who are losing money, not being able to get paid, not being able to work, but footballers are being told they can. So whose morality and what's right and what's wrong? So we can't have it both ways. We can't say that, okay, it's immoral, but then it is also, people could argue, immoral that footballers can still get paid and go and do their job. So shall we cancel the season because other people aren't able to work?
Well, I've always thought as well that why is football carrying on? Why is football doing this
Yeah,
when there are so many cases? But then
yeah.
I went to the game yesterday, Crawley Leeds, and I look at the game, and it gave everybody in the country a possible warm feeling to say, well, look, Crawley beat Leeds and thoroughly deserved to. So, you can't just keep on people. You can't just keep a thing going because it's for the well-being of people's health and all that sort of thing. No, you can't do that. But they are allowed to go to proceed. The government are very happy with the football to proceed. They're following the protocols and all these kind of things as well. They're trying to do that. Some aren't doing it, but we obviously see the cases in the papers when players aren't doing it. But I'm in agreement with you there. Football is a thing where you say, well, why does it have to carry on? It didn't in the first place. When the first lockdown occurred, it stopped. Cases then dropped and everything else like that. But the government have allowed it to go on. So
Which
if I
doesn't
was
make
in
it
charge
morally
of
right.
anything else, I would have said no. No, it doesn't make it right. I would say no.
That's what I mean.
I'm not
So
backing
when
it,
do we?
John. I'm not backing. I'm
Yeah,
not backing football going on. I'm saying it shouldn't have gone on, but it is going on. But then to go and
yeah,
compound it by going on a trip, just
yeah.
well, it's bizarre.
Absolutely. But when do we then decide to use the moral issue rather than a protocol or governmental issue? Because we're talking about morally wrong because they went on a trip, but it's morally wrong, people could argue, to then play football. But then you can then say, yes, it's safe because they're able to do it. And then what about kids who can't play football? So when you talk about morality, it can be used one way or another depending on what side of the fence you sit on.
Yeah, but John, you
Yes,
don't go on
although
a trip to the other side of the world where everybody's going to that place. The COVID cases in Dubai now and the UAE are rising exponentially. So it's just inviting trouble, and it's already you're heaping sort of criticism on yourselves. You're actually digging yourself in a really big hole if you go on that trip, which they've done.
There are more COVID cases in
yeah,
Scotland than there are in Dubai. There are more COVID cases in the UK. The safest place, more safe, it would probably be safer to go to Dubai than to stay in England if you're going to live your normal life in England.
Well, check the facts now, John. Check the facts now.
You think there are more cases in Dubai than there are in England and in the UK?
No, no, no. In Scotland.
In Scotland, there are more COVID
Yeah.
cases in Dubai than there are in Scotland.
Yeah. Well, in the United Arab Emirates, yeah, UAE, yeah.
Okay, we'll check that.
let's talk about the football, boys. Let's talk about the football. Let's start with the Rangers win. John, let's get your perspective on what was obviously another impressive 3 points on the road at Aberdeen. So often a problem meeting for Rangers, and Stephen Gerrard has found that. But another good win against 10 men at Pittodrie that takes them 22 points clear.
When you have a situation whereby the harmony, the togetherness, the belief is there, you can win football matches even if you don't play sparkling football. That's a sign of champions. I've always felt Liverpool 2 years ago, when they lost the league, no matter how well they were, I felt that they had to play well to win. And when you look at teams of the past who are champions, you pick up points even when you don't necessarily play well. And that for me is the perfect scenario because you can't all guarantee that you're going to play well all the time, but you have to guarantee that if you don't play well, we're not going to lose and we can win. And that's what's happening at Rangers at the moment because of the harmony, the togetherness, the belief, the support that everybody is giving them. They are now in a position whereby I felt that Celtic possibly could have caught them had they beaten them 4 times, because obviously with them being, I don't know at the time, 14, 15 points behind, then if that then happened, then maybe Rangers, with the self-belief, the confidence, the togetherness, the harmony may have faltered. Whereas now, I don't think that that's the case. So I don't necessarily think it was a great performance by Rangers, a sparkling performance, but they got the job done because that is what champions do.
And Terry, they have so many different ways now of getting over the line. They haven't been able to rely heavily on Morelos, and yet yesterday he steps up and delivers the 2 goals that wins the game.
Yes, and Tavernier misses the penalty as well, so that's a bit of a shock. So he didn't need the penalty to get them on the road, but Morelos looks really sharp. He seems to have got his mojo back, and he's firing on all cylinders, as you say, which is a big help for Rangers. But John used that word very strongly, and it's very true. When you're winning games and keep on winning games, you feel invincible. You feel strong, and everything you do seems to be the right thing. And teams that are up against you, they've not so much beaten before the game started, but they really fear the fact that Rangers could go on to score 6, 7, 8 goals against them if they really wanted to. But the confidence factor is enormous. Remember last year when Rangers were slightly ahead of Celtic and pushing on, and they blew a lot from that. And there's a lot of thought gone into obviously from last year. They've revitalised. They looked at the way that they stuttered last year, and they've obviously found a way to cure that. But Celtic have shot themselves in the foot early on in the season, drawing games, losing to Rangers, and Rangers were fortunate in the Old Firm game, obviously, because Celtic dominated the game and just didn't score when they were on top, and that's a fatal sign. But I think Rangers know now. I don't know what John thinks, but Rangers seem to now, when they play Celtic, they know that they're capable of beating Celtic. They've got that supreme confidence, having won the last three, and in crucial games like the Old Firm, that's when the league is possibly decided.
So has the balance of power swung, John?
It has at this moment in time, yes. When you talk about the balance of power, you have to look over a period of time, because can we see Celtic coming again maybe next season? Yes. The balance of power when Terry was there, they won it 9 times. The balance of power didn't swing just because they won it for the first time. When they win it second, third, fourth, and fifth, you can look at the balance of power. But at this moment in time, yeah, that has happened. But as I said, from Rangers' point of view, it's really just the belief, the togetherness, and the harmony that even if they don't outplay teams, batter teams, look as if they're going to score 6 and 7, they will still win. And for me, that is what I remember when I was at Liverpool and we were neck to neck with Manchester United coming into February, March, April. And I always felt that they would win the league because I knew that we would have to play well to win. And if we didn't play well, we wouldn't win. Whereas what Manchester United did is that they got the result. And Rangers can do both. Now they play well and they win. And if they don't play well, or not don't play well, but if they don't go and batter teams 6 and 7 and they put in an average performance, they are still winning. So that for me is really what the epitome of I'm not going to say a perfect team, but in terms of getting the right results, that's what you need to do.
So who's got that trait, as best you can see it, amongst the number of teams that are hovering around the top of the English Premier League, Terry, at the moment? Who's got that will or way to win that marks them out as potential winners of what's going to be, it seems, quite a tight race in England?
Yeah, it does. Man City seem to be coming on to a bit of form. Manchester United, obviously, as well. But Manchester United have to go to Liverpool next Sunday. So it's a big game for them. A big game. It was always a big game anyway, despite the circumstances now. So, well, when you look, Leicester City are still up there as well. When you look at Manchester City, Spurs, Southampton, Everton, anyone can beat anyone this year. Liverpool are finding it difficult to get that form that they had last year, very consistent form. Because when you're champions, everybody wants to beat you. Everybody wants to make their mark. And Liverpool certainly have felt that sort of extra pressure on them this year to try and retain it. It's not easy to win a title, but it's much harder to retain it the next year. So they're finding. I still think they've got the power and they've got the goals in them to go on and win it, despite all the setbacks, despite Van Dijk's injury and the rest of the injuries. But I still think that they'll do it. But it won't be easy for them, and it's not going to be easy right up until the wire, I don't think.
Yes, obviously Sunday feels like a big game, but they always get built up into these enormous occasions, John, don't always deliver, and it may not decide anything. United, of course, play Burnley in midweek before that, but Liverpool have they just lost a bit of their mojo at the moment, just in recent weeks for you?
They've lost their mojo and they're top of the league. That shows the expectations that people have of Liverpool. No matter, we're talking about Liverpool not being the same team. They've lost a few points, and we are top of the league. So imagine what would happen if we didn't lose our mojo. Where would we be? 20 points clear. Why we should be 20 points clear? This is football. The English league is very difficult, and it really shows the expectations that Liverpool have. For people to be talking about Liverpool not being the same team, but we are top of the league. So, to answer the question that you asked at the beginning, Manchester City and Liverpool for me still will be the teams who will be first and second. I like to think Liverpool first, but Man City could win the league. Because regardless of what's happening up until now, we would be surprised if Liverpool and Man City fall away to lose games. If Manchester United, who can go top if they get a point against Burnley, if they all of a sudden fell away, would we be surprised? No, because this is the inconsistency that every other team has. From Manchester United, who aren't being inconsistent at this moment in time, but we can see when they played in Europe, we can see at certain games. I don't think that they will continue to do this consistently week in, week out, because they'll always have the question mark against, is Ollie the right man? Is Pogba going to stay? And once you have that disunity and that uncertainty, you will drop points, particularly when it gets much tougher. As we did in the mid '90s with Liverpool. So for me, Liverpool and Man City are the teams who you can see going the distance. But long may this blip continue for Liverpool as long as we stay where we are.
Do you go along with that, Terry?
Yeah, well, yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, I still think they'll do it, like I said. But Manchester City have got games in hand as well. But you have to win them. It's such a funny league this year when you think, without the crowds. I know that they finished last season without the crowds and all this sort of thing, but most of the teams were intact with their squads. Now most squads are quite depleted with injuries. People say it's about coming back too early last year and doing this and doing that, but they're professional footballers, so they should be able to play a big number of games in this very short season. But it's down. I don't know what John feels about retaining the titles. You've got to have a mental strength to win a title. You've got to be very strong. You've got to have the best defense. You've got to have the best of this and best of that. But mentally, you've got to be at your best. And it becomes not so much doubly different or difficult in the second, and to try and retain your title. But mentally, you've got to be even tougher, even more tough. So, you've got to be tough in one aspect, and then you've got to be even tougher to try and retain it. So I think, I don't know what John feels, but I think when you win your second title, say you retain the title, you feel more of an accomplishment than when you won the first one. What do you think, John?
Absolutely, I agree with you 100%. But in that respect, it's a reflection on the manager. You look at Sir Alex Ferguson and what he demanded after they won the league. The Liverpool teams of the past, when I played, forget about you've won the league. Forget about that. It's about the next league, the next season. And Jurgen Klopp will be saying that to his players. Forget about the season. Every single game they play, you can see the way they play in the games they play against Aston Villa in the Cup. They aren't complacent in any way, shape, or form. What could work against them this year, which hasn't worked them in previous years, is the injury situation. So if you look at the back four, for example, and when the youngsters have come in or other players have come in, they've done well, which is why we're still top. Can we continue to do that consistently for the next 20 games without reinforcing the defense, if you like? And that for me is the question mark. But from the point of view of the attitude and the mentality, Jurgen Klopp will make sure every one of those players has got the right attitude and the right commitment. It's a problem as to... So I would then say, had we had our full team out, we would have lost the games we did. But funny, interesting, you pick up on what Terry said about the fact that there are no crowds. There are certain clubs that will play better when there are no crowds. And those are big clubs with big ambition. But the reality is that I don't want to be unkind to them and say that they're not big clubs. But if you look at Aston Villa, Everton, they are big clubs. And the expectation of the fans for them to play well and to win matches in a full house has put a lot of pressure on them in the past. Whereas it doesn't surprise me that Aston Villa and Everton are doing well because of the pressure their fans put on them when they actually play. And a club like Sheffield United, who needs their fans, are doing... If the fans were there, I don't think Sheffield United would be in the position they are. Similarly with players. There are certain... People talk about professional players, and Terry will back me up on this, I'm sure. I hope. There are certain players who are fantastic players, but in front of crowds, they can't perform. So when people talk about a footballer needs a crowd to perform, there are certain players who are fantastic in training, and that's why you go down to the lower divisions and you see great players, but put them in front of 50,000, they can't perform. So there are certain players who perform better in front of empty stadiums as well, as funny as that may seem. I mean, I don't know how you feel, Terry, but I've known lots of players who, when the pressure is on, they can't perform. And the fact that they're empty stadiums mean they can perform. And that is why you see certain players doing well and certain teams doing well with no crowds.
Terry?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely
You don't
right.
have to name names, Terry.
You're you're like me. It didn't matter if there was a crowd or not. You had a professional standard that you had to get to, and you know, we tried our very best to do that every week in, week out. You never hear the crowds when you're on the pitch generally anyway, but it's just the build up when you go and warm up, and when you do, you know, you're on the pitch, the atmosphere builds up. You can feel it. It's electric. It's a lovely warm feeling. To most players, yeah, but you're right. To some players, and if some players are going through a hard time, or they're through a hard time, and they become the focus of the crowd's attention, then it's not easy. But you know, look at yourself. You know, all the chanting and everything else that you have endured, and other black players have endured as well in the past. It's horrific. So you know, you get used to that, like yourself and what you did, and Mark Walters when he first came to Rangers up in Scotland. You know, these players are tough, really tough mentally, because you have to be. That's an outside issue to the game itself, and all the pressures of the game, and you've got something else happening. You've got to be have that double mental strength. But I just think you're right with Sheffield United, and you're right with say a crowd at the top. You're going for the title. The crowd will you on. Like you're 1-0 down, and the Kop. You know, you just think what the Kop could do for you, or the whole end at Villa. You know, and all these great areas of noise from crowds. It can lift the team. It can lift you as a player into doing unbelievable things. So we're missing that, and it does feel a bit flat. But you know, and the football is still very good. There's still some good goals. It's still exciting, and if anything, what it has done is sort of leveled it up when it comes down to the game. So we're, you know, not so much a level playing field, but it has helped as well to make this league far more competitive, and I think that was last year.
But Terry, do you know any players when you played for Ipswich or the other clubs who you felt performed really well, but in front of big crowds they didn't perform because of the pressure that they puts on them, because of their mentality, their character?
Well, you used to go to Anfield, didn't we? And you know that sign that, you know, this is Anfield, and you walk out together, and it's you just come up into the arena it's like a European stadium. You know, you're not actually coming through a tunnel; you're coming up a tunnel and up into the stadium. That's what it was then. It was just an amazing place. So, you know, when you do that, you've got to have a big mental strength. We never had big crowds at Ipswich. We probably get to about 30,000, and they made a decent noise in the stadium as well. But when you're playing the big clubs, I found it lifted me. So, yeah, but some players it didn't. It shrunk. They shrunk, and they were fearful until they got a bit of a rollicking from the senior players, and then they got going again. But yeah, it can make a big difference. So I think it can help some teams and not help some teams. And I think it hasn't helped Liverpool as well, by, you know, especially at home, because they haven't got that following, that fanatical following like other clubs have, that are really going to put them on and go that extra bit. But they had that at the end of last season. But obviously everything was in gear last season. The injuries weren't happening as they have happened. So it's up to the younger players who are going to come in to Liverpool to make sure they have that right mental strength, like we said, and make sure that they can see the job through. But there's enough senior players at Liverpool that can help make that happen, and the managers as well. So there's an extra responsibility on the managers, but there's always a responsibility on managers to succeed, otherwise they get sacked.
The interesting thing for me at Liverpool, sorry, just this last point on this, is not so much that, yes, it inspires the home team, it inspires the boys, but the fact that it intimidates the opposition also plays a factor. And there's no intimidating atmosphere at Anfield to intimidate the opposition. So forget about whether it inspires Liverpool, because for me, Klopp is the inspiration. Klopp demands that you perform regardless whether you're at Anfield, 100,000, 50,000. But I think it really doesn't intimidate the opposition. So the opposition can play without any fear of the 12th man being there.
Yeah. It cuts both ways. Here's a thought then to you both, to perhaps finish on. Will the trophies that are lifted later this year, assuming we get that far in this strange time, will they mean more or less for the season that we are going through, for the times that we are going through? Will it mean more because of all that it's taken to win those trophies, or will it mean less because it's been a strange and discomforting season that perhaps hasn't always reflected as to who's the best team, Terry?
Well, I don't think it will take anything away from it when you do win it. I think you'll say we won this title because, or despite all the setbacks, all the medical issues and everything else off the pitch, and obviously on the pitch, and you know, obviously COVID cases with the club. We won the league despite, and I think that a lot of the players and a lot of the fans especially would say, it's possibly a bigger achievement than it was in the past. And I know John's right with the crowds making getting you intimidated or inspiring. It can be either one. But they've had to do it without the crowds, and they've had to do it without certain team members, and they've had to do it without all the frills and spills that they normally get when they go and travel and train and all these kind of things as well. So they've won it. They will have won it despite. So I think it will mean more. I honestly think it will mean more to players, to the fans, to the clubs.
Yeah,
I
although
think
presumably those that come second will argue the opposite, John.
Well, of course, last year, Manchester United fans and Man City fans will say, well, not Man City because they didn't want Man United to win. It will say it'll mean less because it wasn't. And of course, I'm sure Celtic fans will say when Rangers win it that it'll mean less because of COVID. And depending on Rangers fans will say it'll mean more. It means the same because what happens, regardless of whether there is COVID in 2020 or there is not COVID, you come up against challenges of full stadiums, challenges of injuries, challenges of unusual situation. Now, this is just another challenge. And it's not it's the challenge is for your team, regardless of whether 5 are down with COVID or not, as you could have 5 injured players when there's not COVID. The challenge is to win under any circumstances, to adapt to the circumstances, to show the mentality, your attitude, your commitment, your quality to win a football match, to win a league. So therefore, for me, it'll mean the exact same, regardless of whether it was COVID or not, because these are all challenges that we have to overcome. And the best teams overcome those challenges. And there are no challenges which are harder than others, regardless of whether it's COVID or not. So for me, it'll be equally as worthy, whoever wins.
But John,
Always an
with all due
education, fellas.
respect, with all due respect, your circumstances you're talking about are the ones that happen traditionally and always happen. This never happened. This has never happened before. The end of last season and this season. So these are huge new issues that are facing the players and the clubs and the fans. Unbelievable. So therefore,
It's facing all the clubs in the same way. It's facing all the clubs in the same way. So you don't have an advantage or a disadvantage over other clubs. And in many respects, I suppose if you have bigger squads, it's an advantage because if you have players missing, you have a bigger squad. You can, like in the FA Cup, for example, whereby you have to play the youth team, whereas in the old days you didn't. So therefore, you could argue that the bigger clubs have it easier because they have bigger squads. But that is why I would not say it's either harder or it's easier. Of course, being a Rangers man, you would say some. This will count as 10 then, Terry, wouldn't it, for Rangers?
Well, no, because the first title wins of Celtic, Rangers weren't even in the league. So you're talking about it. Well, Celtic may feel Rangers with this and all that, and it was COVID or whatever it is. You can have. I mean, when Celtic won 9 titles, how many titles would have an asterisk beside it to say Rangers weren't there?
Absolutely. So I'll agree with you in terms of when Celtic won the title, even up until now, because for the first 4 or 5 years, Rangers weren't able to compete when they first came up. They weren't able to compete because they didn't have the finances to compete, and this is probably the first time it's been fairly level. So maybe in Scotland, you could argue that Celtic had it easier for the 9 years. But I don't think if you look at it now, whereby Celtic and Rangers are even, that Rangers had it easier or Rangers had it harder. Or are we talking generally? I'm not talking specifically about Celtic and Rangers. I'm talking about football generally. When somebody has won their league, be it Paris Saint-Germain, be it Liverpool, Manchester City, I think that it has been difficult. As Rangers winning it has been extremely difficult.
But one thing I must say, John, how can you say that Rangers and Celtic are equal when Celtic have had all that Champions League money and all the extra money as well for being in the top division that Rangers never got in the bottom divisions, and they should be out of sight. Rangers should never have been able to catch, or as you think, catch them up. Well, Rangers haven't caught them up. Rangers are still behind financially, a long way behind them financially. So at the end of the day, if Rangers do win this title, it's going to be a huge achievement.
Of course, it's an achievement. But if you look at, so you're talking specifically about Rangers. The question was football generally. Liverpool winning the league, Man City winning the league, teams getting promoted, whoever wins the Spanish league. You can be specific about Celtic and Rangers and say it's a big achievement. But if you look at player for player up in Scotland, because of course when we were there, and in fact when you were there, as much as Celtic and Rangers may have been equal, when you had yourself and Gary Stevens and Mark Haley and those players, they were better than Celtic players. When I was there and we had Larson and Lambert, but then Rangers had a whole squad, then as much as both teams are huge, then the player for player, then you could see that Rangers were better than Celtic. Whereas now, if you look player for player, are Celtic's players necessarily better than the players that Rangers have? I don't think so. The finances are, but I don't think that player for player, that the players are better.
trying to say is that Celtic shouldn't be in this position. If you're saying are they better, are they equal the players? Celtic should be right up the top. Their Celtic players should be far better than any just could get because they've had all this money for the last 9 years of playing in Champions Leagues.
But they've not been able to get the players, have they? Because once upon a time, do you think the Henry Claessens, the Paul Lamberts, do you think that the Giovanni van Bronckhorsts and the Georg Albert and the Terry Butchers and the Gareth Stevens would be going to Celtic or Rangers? So it's harder for Celtic and Rangers to be able to get, regardless of the money they have, to be able to get the quality of players that they had in the past. So therefore, I understand what you're saying. Celtic have much more money, but they've not been able to spend the money to get the players to come because those quality of players that went to Rangers and Celtic and Scotland in the past aren't necessarily going there now.
But how can you not tempt players? You can tempt players with big wages, John. You can tempt players to come along there. Rangers had the money. They spent the money and they blew a lot of money on a great squad, a huge squad. I'm just saying what I'm saying. Rangers have been down in the depths. They've been really low. Celtic have had all this money before. There was a huge gap between Rangers and Celtic. So why now, if you're saying that the gaps that is now leveled off, how can that be?
Yes.
How can Celtic, not so much the manager, but you're looking at the hierarchy, how could they have not have then spent that money to make sure that when Rangers never get back to that level?
When Rangers
problems were of their own making, weren't they?
Rangers were spending money
Yeah.
in the same way that the top teams in England were, the top teams in Germany were, the top teams in Spain were. Now, you're not going to earn more money going to Scottish football than you will in Portugal, Spain, France, England, Germany, any other European leagues. Whereas in the old days, you would have. But the teams now aren't spending that money. And in fact, Rangers, when they win the league this year, I don't think Rangers are going to be spending the money to get the best European players as they did in the past to go to Rangers. So as much as they have the money, the players aren't going there because they can earn more money elsewhere, whereas they couldn't in the past.
Well, my final comment is if Rangers have got back to the position that they're in now, it's taken a bit of time, but it's all credit to Rangers for getting to that position and saying, right, well, now we can take on Celtic. And Celtic should be saying to themselves, we kick ourselves because we should never be in this position in the first place. But there we are.
Let's save a bit for next time. Always an education, fellas. Always an education. Thank you both very much as always.